Have you ever watched someone sell something that was very similar to what you're selling? However, they do such a better job at it. They're great with engaging with their audience and they sell out almost every single time. But you have a very similar product, you have very similar messaging, but your product isn't selling. And why is that? A lot of it has to do with your audience. So today we're going to talk about what exactly your audience and audience expectations have to do with marketing. You're listening to the Optimize Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Barnes. I'm a customer journey marketing strategist, and I help you maximize sales by optimizing the customer experience. Today, we're actually going to take a look at 3 different K-pop groups and why 2 of them sold out of their tours and why the other one not only didn't sell out, but they actually had to cancel a show. These 3 different groups all have it's very similar music. They're all K-pop boy bands, but again, 2 of them sold out, 1 of them didn't. And we're going to look at why that third K-pop act didn't sell. Even though you may not listen to K-pop, you may have heard of BTS. BTS is one of the biggest music acts right now, and they are the biggest K-pop group out there. Their tour was recently announced, and they just had ticketing last week, and of course, it has completely sold out, as was expected. Now, when it comes to bands like BTS, they can announce a tour at any time, anywhere, and people will flock to see them. The reason why they're able to do this is because of their huge global fan base. They have a massive audience. And if we look at Instagram numbers as an indicator, BTS has 78 million followers at the time of this recording. That is a huge following. And of course, the bigger your audience is, the more that you're able to sell out and sell out quickly. We're actually going to be focusing on 2 K-pop acts who you probably have never heard of. The first one is Rise. They have a following of 4.7 million followers. And then we're going to take a look at a group called One Verse, and they have a much smaller following at 310,000 followers. That's less than 500,000 followers. Yet One Verse was able to sell out their North American tour, whereas Rise really struggled with ticket sales and even had to cancel a tour stop entirely. First, let's take a look at BTS and why BTS is able to sell out very quickly. Now, it's semi-obvious. They have a huge global fan base. They've been around for more than 10 years. There's been a lot of anticipation and build-up for this tour, but let's talk more about the things that they did right when it came to this tour announcement. The first one was, aside from years and years of building up their fan base, is that they announced early. They announced last year that they were going to release an album in the spring and they were also going to do a tour. So already they've given us a heads up, letting us know that they have big plans for spring. Now, BTS has actually been on hiatus since 2022. That's about 4 years of hiatus. However, they've actually been quite active during those 4 years, releasing several solo albums, some members releasing multiple solo albums, and they've done 3 solo tours. Now, I don't want to talk too much about BTS only because they are so massive and they are so big, and it's quite hard for us smaller marketers to relate to such a big group. However, it does give us some insights on how to act and how to be when you are a lot bigger of a marketer. So, for example, BTS, they actually had a content plan for those entire 4 years that they went on hiatus. They scheduled all of the solo member albums, they scheduled all of the solo tours, and they made sure to stagger that content so that when the members were actually in the military, their content that was all pre-recorded, because they actually can't record anything while they're enlisted, all of that content was pre-recorded and pre-planned, and they scheduled it out, they dripped it out for the entire time that they were on hiatus. So again, they scheduled their content, they created all of this knowing that they were going to be on a massive 4-year break, so that by the time that that break ended, the fans were still connected with BTS. At the end of the day, the big takeaway is to make sure to set up systems for content creation. Having those systems will allow you to take scheduled breaks. It'll allow you to stay in touch with your audience if you ever need to step away from your business. So if you get anything from BTS, it's to set up content systems. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at One Verse. They have a much smaller audience, and yet they were also able to sell out of their North American tour. So let's talk about what happened. They're very, very self-aware about exactly how small their audience actually is. They knew that they're not BTS. Do not have 78 million followers. They have less than half a million followers. In fact, at the time of this recording, they only had 310,000 followers. Now, it's not a smalling if you're a marketing influencer, but it is relatively small in the K-pop world. One of the things that Oneverse actually did well in the beginning is that they lean into the personal backgrounds of the members. They really leveraged the member stories and backgrounds and history in order to create a way for the audience to connect with them. Now, two of the members have a dramatic background in the fact that they've actually defected from North Korea, and then the other two don't have an exciting or harrowing story about defecting from North Korea. Rather, they grew up simply in North America. Now, whether or not you have a dramatic history of leaving a very dangerous country, or if you're simply Nathan from Arkansas, one of the things that you want to do with your story is find the threads that relate to people. And something that one of the members said in an interview is that they had more similarities than differences. So while the two North Korean defectors actually have very wildly different backgrounds than the two members that came from the United States, they actually found the threads that connected them together. And that's what connects them not only with each other, but also with their audience. So, one of the reasons for their success as a small group is that connection with that audience. They really understand and know who their audience is because they talk to them. That's really what it is. So, when they decided to do a North American tour, what they did was they put up a post on Instagram and said, "Hey, what cities would you like to see us in?" And then from that poll, they took the comments and they created a short list of, I think, 20 cities. I don't remember, and they asked their audience to vote for which cities they wanted to be in. And those cities that made the top five were guaranteed to be city stops in their North American tour. And they really got that audience engagement early on. And that's what you need to do when you are starting out as a smaller marketer with a smaller audience. The more that you can stay connected with your audience, the more that you can keep them engaged, the more that you can keep them a part of product decisions, as in what's going to be included and what's not going to be included, the more invested they're going to be into that final product. Another thing that OneVerse did right was manage expectations. They knew that their audience size was small, and so they chose venue sizes that fit their audience size as well. So they didn't go after giant stadiums or arenas. They settled for much smaller, more intimate venues. And this allowed them to actually sell tickets out quite quickly. And when it comes to online marketing and expectations, a lot of us will have the expectation that our launch is going to do really well. We're going to run a bunch of ads and everyone's going to buy our product. Everyone's going to love it. And then when our numbers don't meet those expectations, we're disappointed. So take a look back at your audience. Is your audience size big enough to match the goal of what it is that you want to sell? If not, then you're going to need to grow your audience or to be a little bit more patient. The other thing, too, is that even though you may have a great product and even though you may have a sizable audience, does your audience know you well enough to purchase that product? Do they have a relationship with you? Even though, again, OneVerse is a little bit newer, people built a relationship with them in the beginning. They got to know them, they got to know their stories, and they were invested in the final decision about which city tour stops that they were going to have. Do you have that same connection with your audience? Are they invested in the product? If you're not getting feedback from your audience, or if your audience is not invested, or if you don't have a really large audience, all of that could be factors as to why your launch didn't perform as expected. The other thing too is that OneVerse started with a smaller offer. They didn't have giant stadium tours. They didn't have a giant set list. They started with a smaller set list, smaller venues. So when you're just starting out and you are creating a product, make sure that the product size is the right fit for your experience in terms of online marketing. If you have not done a launch before, I do not recommend launching a giant 10 module course with all of these lessons and all of these bells and whistles. Start with the smaller product. Start with the introductory product where it's just maybe a portion of what it is that you eventually want to sell. But because you're just starting out just now, then you don't want to put all that pressure on yourself to create something massive. So start with something smaller and do a much smaller launch. Manage those expectations and just make sure that those expectations match the product and the audience that you currently have. All right, now let's talk about the band Rise and what happened with their tour last year. Now, Rise is a mid level K pop group with about 4.7 million followers. So they have a sizable following. It's just not as big as other groups. Now, Rise is not a small group, but they're also not a big group. And one of the things that you have to do when you're a mid level group is do something that really stands out. You really, really need to connect with your audience before you announce any tour stops or any tour dates. If you don't, then you're not going to get the traction that you're looking for. Where a lot of people will relate to the problems with Rise is when they have an average product with an average audience size. They had an audience, but there was also a lot of other people who liked other similar groups. They were just one of many K-pop acts out there, and there wasn't really anything during the time of the tour announcement that really had them stand out from other groups. You really need to make sure that you're doing something that stands out, that is unique and speaks to your audience. So, for example, with One Verse, they were able to lean into the stories of the two North Korean defectors as well as the two Americans, and they used that to bring their audience in. I really don't know what the draw is with Rise. I can't tell you. With other groups, that I follow, there are certain things about the members that really draw me in. For example, with ATEEZ, their leader, their captain, Hongjung, he is not just a rapper, he is also a producer and he's also a fantastic singer as well. And then the other members are also just as talented. Stray Kids, they have three of their members who are actually producers of their music. And so these different bands all have different unique things about them. With Rise, I'm not exactly sure what that unique thing is. And so that's why they kind of blend in with those other groups. The next mistake that I want to focus on is the fact that they didn't give their audience a lot of time to realize that they were even going on tour. They sort of just let them know that they were going on tour and just dropped the tour dates, said, here we are, here's a ticket sale, go buy them. We make this mistake a lot as marketers where we just kind of drop the sale on our audience. We don't let them know that it's coming. And we don't give them time to realize that a sale is coming. We don't give them enough time to get them excited. There's no emotional buy-in for this upcoming launch or this upcoming tour. You need to get your audience emotionally invested in the fact that this is coming up. Be excited. If you're not excited, they're not going to be excited. The way that BTS really was dropping hints that something was coming, gave us a hint about approximately when it was going to happen. They were telling us that something was coming. They held back some of the details about the album because of course they want that to be a surprise, but they let their audience know that there is something coming. We have an album, we have a tour, it's in the works. It's what we're working on. And that behind the scenes look at what it is that you're working on, you could do something similar with your audience. Get them excited, let them know you're working on something new, even if it's a relaunch of an existing product, and say, "Hey, we're getting ready for this relaunch. Come follow us along," and share that behind the scenes journey. Let them know that you're working on this. Whereas Rise just kind of popped up out of nowhere and said, here are our tour dates, go buy tickets. And so it really blindsided their audience. Now, this last mistake about not understanding their audience size was really the thing that put a giant stain on the entire tour, because not only did they not get the ticket sales that they were expecting, they also had to cancel an entire city stop. And they did it about 2 weeks before the actual show, which really upset a lot of people. No, I do want to say that the choice of the venues and overestimating the audience demand is really on the managers and not actually the band itself. So, for any of you who are Rise fans, please don't take this as a dig at Rise. I actually love them and I want to see them in concert. However, this is entirely the management's fault for choosing venues of their size and setting up expectations, thinking that this tour was going to be a lot bigger than it actually was. So, that said, let's talk about why this was such a mistake. Now, the problem with canceling a tour stop is that people have already made plans. They have canceled or they have specifically put in their calendar that they're going to go to this specific show. They're canceling everything else in their calendar and they're showing up. Now, it's one thing to cancel something, it's another thing to cancel something and then not offer anything in return. So, not only did they cancel that tour stop, they made no amends to the people that bought tickets to that show. So, if you already had plane tickets or you made accommodations or you rearranged your schedule to show up to this specific show, you don't get any compensation whatsoever, or at least the management and the company offered no compensation whatsoever. They weren't saying anything about, hey, maybe we're going to do another show later this year, or maybe you can get a discount on tickets in another city. Nothing like that. They offered no compensation, and that was the biggest issue with that city, is that there was no compensation for the fans. Now, as an online marketer, you're probably not going to be in a situation where canceling a program that you no longer decide that you want to host, that's really not going to put a big dent into anybody's plans. But if you do come across a situation where you do have to cancel something, or let's say there you have an existing program and you have to cancel, let's say, the remaining coaching calls because of something that came up, then you want to make sure that you're offering some sort of compensation in return so that people don't have that bad taste in their mouth, that they don't have this poor memory of you. You want to make sure that if something goes wrong, that your audience is taken care of. Going back to overestimating audience size and audience demand, that really goes back to understanding your audience. Do you really truly understand how many people are in your audience? And do you understand how much of your audiences are actually warm buyers? Are you staying connected with your audience? Do you do stories regularly or post on social media regularly? Are you sending out emails on a weekly basis that keeps you connected with your audience? If you're not staying in touch with your audience, you're not going to know exactly how big your audience is or how connected they are with you. So, one of the things that you can do, again, is just stay in touch with your audience. Stay in touch by doing stories. Make sure that you're engaging with the people that engage back. So if people are leaving comments, make sure to reply back. Now, I understand those with a much bigger audience can't do that, but most of us honestly don't have that big of an audience. What we can do is at least reply to the first 10 people. And what I like to do when I have a post that has a lot of comments is I just heart or like all of the comments. So I don't necessarily read word for word. I kind of get the general gist. And then I just make sure that I've acknowledged everyone that has left a comment. Now, if somebody says something really poignant, or if they say something that really stands out, then I will go ahead and reply to that specific comment. But for the most part, I at least make sure that everyone is seen in the comments. Now, keep in mind that your audience size is not necessarily a reflection of how many people are actually ready to buy. What you really need to focus on is not just audience size, but how big your warm audience is. In the case of Oneverse, they actually had a very, very warm audience. Again, less than 500,000 people. However, many of those people were willing to and ready to buy tickets. In the case of Rise, they had 4.7 million followers. Again, much bigger audience, but they didn't have that connection with their audience, and they didn't have as many people who were willing to go out of their way to buy tickets. At the end of the day, the person who is most connected with their audience will win their audience over. And you've noticed a lot in this throughout this podcast is that I've talked about connecting with your audience, showing up on stories, polling your audience, reacting to comments. The more connected you are with your audience, the more receptive they're going to be. When it comes to selling our online offers, we need to make sure that we understand exactly how big our audience is and how much of our audience is actually connected. One of the best things you can do as an online marketer is to make sure that you are consistent with content creation as well as engaging with your audience. So, as you create that content, you'll get feedback from your audience about what's working and what's not working. And when you do that, create more of the content that is working. And then when you get to the comments of your content, you'll see what people want, what it is that they're connected to. And then the lack of comments is also a sign as well of like, hey, maybe my audience really isn't connecting to this. And that'll give you a good idea of what your audience is actually looking for and what they're receptive to. The more that you do this, the more that you can refine the languaging, not just with your content, but also your sales page and your sales email. Similarly, with these K-pop groups, they kind of get an idea of what music the fans are receptive to. If fans are receptive to a certain style of music, they'll create more of it. If fans are not receptive to a certain style of music, they'll create less of it. And so being in touch with your audience that way will help give you an idea, again, of what they're receptive to and what they're not. All right. Now, this is slightly bit of a tangent, but I wanted to include this here because this is very important. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way you find out what you don't know is by continuing to create content and seeing what the feedback is. We have this tendency to want to put out a perfect product. And so we kind of hold back on releasing it because we don't think it's quite right yet. Well, we don't know if it's quite right yet because we haven't quite released it. And so the more that you're creating, the more that not only will you get an idea of what your audience wants, but you also get an idea of what it is that you're good at as well. You're like, oh, I'm really good at doing this, or I'm really great at doing that. You'll also see more efficiencies in your workflow. You'll notice how to edit faster. You'll know how to create content faster because you put in systems in place that makes it easier for you to do these things. And so the more that you create, the more that you produce, whether it's good or bad, you learn from each of those experiences. And those that really do well are the ones that continue to create, put out content, whether it's good or bad. They don't worry about it failing. They just want to keep making and creating. And the only way you learn what you're good at is if you actually put it out there. So if you're in a position where you're like, I don't know if this is good, well, neither do we until you put it out there. And even with this podcast that I'm creating now, it took forever to create this. I don't even know how well it's going to be received, but it's the same with any other content. Sometimes I record a podcast and it's very receptive. Sometimes I'll record a podcast and it's like, I don't think it's done well at all, but I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad until I put it out there. The other thing too that I want to add is to lean into what it is that you love. So for example, obviously I love K-pop. This whole episode has been about K-pop bands. And so I'm leaning into it because it makes it a lot easier to create this content. It has taken me almost 3 hours to create this episode. I don't know how long it's going to be. I think it's going to be around 20 minutes, but it's taking me forever to create this. And the only thing that's kept me going is the fact that I love talking about K-pop. And so tying that in to what I do, tying that in to creating content makes it so much easier. It also makes me a little bit more relatable. So for example, you may not like K-pop, but you are familiar with music and you're familiar with concerts and tour dates. And then similarly, even when I'm watching other idols, the ones that I kind of enjoy the most are the ones that really are passionate about their hobbies and interests. So for example, Hongjoong of ATEEZ, he likes to play with DJ equipment. And sometimes he'll come on stories showing off his latest new, what is it called, a DJ console or whatever. And he's like pressing the keys and pressing the buttons and coming up with beats and things like that. And it's just fun to watch him be excited about it. Similarly, when you do something similar to your content and you're showing off, I always come up with Zach Spuckler. He's the one that always comes top of mind, but him and his Taylor Swift cutout during his launch, Taylor Swift cutout right behind him. And then Liz Wilcox of the Email Sound Booth, she has her NSYNC posters in the bag, her Fresh Prince posters, and she loves Fresh Prince. I think she calls herself the Fresh Princess of Email or something like that. I don't remember, but leaning into the things that you love really makes it a lot easier to connect with your audience. You show up differently. You're excited to show up. And then when you're excited to show up, your audience notices that and you create that connection with them. So that's just something that I wanted to add for this podcast. I hope you guys found this helpful. A little bit rambly towards the end because I wasn't sure how I was going to round this out, but I hope you enjoy this. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to get out there. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.